G'day Weapons. Before we get started, a quick shout out to WA's premier regional running event, the Bunbury Three Waters Running Festival. Famous for its beautiful, flat and fast course, the Bunbury Three Waters Running Festival offers Indian Ocean views up Ocean Drive, dolphin spotting in Koombana Bay, fast racing around Big Swamp, and the challenge of the infamous Bunbury Lighthouse, or as we like to call it, the CHECKERED BASTARD. With distances from 5k to the marathon, it's the perfect event for everyone, whether you're a beginner looking for a friendly introduction to road racing or a seasoned runner chasing that elusive personal best. With personalised drink stations, on-course entertainment, and a finish line vibe that captures everything great about the regional WA running community, the Bunbury Three Waters Running Festival delivers an experience you'll remember long after your legs stop aching. So lace up, set your sights south, and make Bunbury your next race destination in April 2026. Find out more and enter now at runbunbury.com.au. Hi everyone and welcome to episode 002 of The Road to the Checkered Bastard, the Warp training series following the 2026 Bunbury Three Waters Running Festival. Look guys, it's just me today. Simon and Vicky are on annual leave, so I think you might remember last episode we caught up with Bunbury locals, Koombana physios, Ritson, and star of the show Alice Luscombe as she prepares for her first half marathon at the Three Waters on 12th of April. Now, continuing with the theme of the Bunbury locals and Koombana physios, back on Feb 5, I was invited to head down to the Bunbury Runners Club where Sean Cowan and Ritson presented the Going the Distance seminar, covering how the body, brain and fuel work together in endurance training. Look, it was really good to catch up with Ian Gibbs again, or as we like to call him, El Presidente, along with many other club members and listeners of the show. Unfortunately, I had some technical difficulties throughout the first 10 minutes or so you'll have to forgive me. However, this was a very informative session and will provide great insight into fueling for beginners and experienced runners alike. On behalf of Team Warp, we are very proud to present this seminar to our listeners. We hope you enjoy.
Thanks for coming down. Thanks to everyone for having us again. We love this event. We reckon it's really good. I think what it does for Bunbury is awesome, and we just like the fact that we can do it hard. So, look, thanks for involving us again. We're going to be down there on the day, as we've been for a few years now, running a bit of a massage tent. So, please come and say good day afterwards if you need, after your run, whatever distance you happen to be doing. And I'll kick off. This is going the distance. So hopefully it's useful. So we've called it the physical, mental and nutritional demands of endurance training and how that integrates for race day success. So hopefully that's inspirational enough. We've sort of split it into a few different sections, hoping that we can kind of make it relevant for everyone, because there's obviously going to be people here who have run a hell of a lot, and people here who maybe are lining up for their first half or their first full, their first 10, their first 5. So hopefully there's a little bit in it for everyone, and we can give someone something that they can use if they're racing on Three Waters Day. We are, as in Ash and I, who generally talk about running, but Alice also, because she's the most recent podcast hero. We're physios with an interest in running. Like I say this before every talk we do on this, we're not running coaches. I'm not a nutritionist, definitely we're not sports psychs, we're physios with an interest in running. So nothing more, nothing less, but for some of the stuff we're going to go through today, there are definitely other professions who are more qualified to talk about it, and if there's stuff that I say that someone wants to put their hands up and take me to task on, please do. There's a little bit of conversation about this sort of stuff as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about the body as far as training goes. You know, what do we need to do with our training for endurance running specifically, and getting ready for events like half and full marathon, I guess. We're going to talk a little bit about the brain at the end, and then we're going to talk a little bit about fueling, because we tend to get a lot of questions from to us, their patients, I guess, because they tend to come in when they're half broken down, or think they might be broken down, about fueling both before, during, and before and during race day. So we're going to talk a fair bit about those things today. Put your hand up, ask questions, we'll just go out, whatever. So, body, training-wise, and I'm assuming, who's running something at 3 waters? Cool. Who's doing a half? Who's doing a full? 10? And 5? Cool. Anyone doing their first race? Yeah? Distance?
That's a marathon.
Marathon. First full.
Fearless putting signs out too.
Sorry?
Fearless putting signs out as well.
We start obviously, when we're into a training program for doing any sort of a running event, mainly a longer distance running event, what we're aiming to do is increase our cardiovascular fitness or our cardiovascular endurance. So essentially, we're trying to, that term means how efficiently you can use fuel to create movement, and mainly using oxygen when we're talking about longer events like that. Did a talk a couple of years ago sort of around this, and we're talking about a lot of the stuff that we're talking about then was around sort of the 80-20 running principle with training programs, and there was big sort of starting to be a big focus then on zone 2 training. So I thought we'd just kind of briefly revisit that, not go into it in too much depth, but
I think when you look at the actual evidence behind increasing the amount of mitochondria in your muscle cells, zone 3 and 4 training does that a hell of a lot also. But there are reasons that we don't do zone 3 or 4 training for the majority of our training program, and it's probably not just because zone 2 is the only one that increases mitochondrial density. And I'll kind of go into that a little bit more. Does that make sense? Has anyone heard a lot about zone 2 training, or done a training program where like we've focused a lot on zone 2, keeping things really, really light? Were you pointing at Maz then?
Yeah, Gary has been complaining about it for months.
You've been whinging about it, Maz. I've heard you talk about it, Maz. I didn't know whether to throw to you or not. What do you think about it?
Oh, it can be challenging to start because it's so much slower than you're used to running, but your recovery is like you finish and you go, oh, I'll do that again.
Yeah. Recovery's a lot quicker. Yeah, Anna?
Yeah, I'm in the process of coming back into running following an injury, and
Yeah.
a lot of my training at the moment in my coach is done too. Basically just recovery, so you're just running at easy pace. Only once a week you will actually do any form of interval training, but all the runs are easy at the moment.
Yeah.
To get me back to where I was.
Yeah. Which I think is, I think are really good points. Like, and I'll go through just a little bit of what I've done of like the benefits and maybe negatives of training in zone 2 versus training in zone 3 and 4, right? And I think training in zone 2, there are definitely benefits. You're definitely increasing your mitochondrial density when you're trying to specifically keep your training to a zone 2 heart rate. What you're certainly doing is you're lowering your recovery timeframes so that you can then repeat a session and do, you can do a session the next day or however quickly you need to do it without, and you can be recovered easily, right? It takes a lot longer to get over a zone 3 or 4 session. I think it allows you to do that time on feet that's essential when you're training for a half or a full. And that has lots of other benefits musculoskeletally as well as cardiovascularly, just getting your bones, muscles, tendons used to the repeated impact of being on your feet for a longer time. And from our point of view, I think like it lowers injury risk. You've got less impact. You're doing a higher percentage of your training in that zone, which I think the real benefit of that is that you're lowering your injury risk so that you can stack those sessions one on top of the other. All right. The negative, I guess, it's quite a slow process. Like it's hard to do, or I found it hard to do whenever you've sort of tried to keep your heart rate at a certain level. And And it is those adaptations that you get from it are quite slow. They're not things that kind of happen really, really quickly. Dan?
I have to say when I did a 3-month period where I was kept my heart rate low,
Yeah.
and it was sort of 130 was my target. I really gamified it. I finished it, I had to do a bit of walk run, so hang on it. Keep it really low.
Yeah.
Quite a long period of time. It was actually quite enjoyable challenge just trying to see how long you can stay.
Yeah.
Kept over.
Yeah.
Over time it got easier and easier. So lower.
How long do you think it took for you to get better at staying there, if that was your sort of goal? It does that, eh? Yeah. Yeah.
I found, I quickly bring it back. I think maybe I'll run quite low anyway.
Yeah.
But I just found it was quite enjoyable having a period of time too, not just being 3 months.
Yeah.
I knew where I was going to.
Yeah.
And I did nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah, cool.
Really positive.
Felt good. Yeah. Cool. Sorry, this probably doesn't work because they don't have a microphone, does it? Should? All right, cool. Zone 3 and 4. So the benefits of Zone 3 and 4, Rideau thrust a journal article at me the other day that was a review article of a bit of research over the last 5 or 6 years of the Zone 3 and 4 versus Zone 2 essentially, and the adaptations that we could actually show might happen. It actually showed that the mitochondrial adaptations in Zone 3 or 4 training in most cases are greater than in Zone 2 training. So I don't know if that just saying that it's better because it improves the mitochondrial numbers is quite enough in saying why maybe we train in both different zones or why we maybe spend more time in Zone 2. Because per unit of time of exercise, pushing those faster heart rate zones seems to actually be really, really effective in producing those sorts of adaptations. But it also, Zone 3 and 4 also does improve the quality and the efficiency of your existing mitochondria. And that's probably where I think you get the most benefit out of things training in those sorts of zones. It also kind of preferentially biases your faster twitch fibers or your type 2 muscle fibers. And obviously when you're training in Zone 3 or 4, you're also pushing that sort of second lactate threshold if you're doing quite an intense session, which essentially is the way that you will get quicker and stronger when you are running. Okay. The negatives of that zone, you've got to recover for higher periods of time, obviously, and the higher injury risk if you put it as too much of a percentage of your weekly running volume, basically. And that's where well-designed programs, I think, will keep that in mind, and it's a little bit individual also. Some people can cope with higher percentages of faster running in their weekly volume, and other people find they feel much more comfortable doing lower percentages of it and more Zone 2. So I reckon, like my kind of vague answer to most complex things, I reckon it's all about balance. I think Zone 2 stuff is probably really good for staying out of the injury zone. It improves their efficiency of fat oxidation, which we'll talk about a little bit later when we talk about fuel. It improves our body's ability to cope with that time on feet thing for bone, muscle, tendon and things. And because you've got to do it for a long time, it's good for chatting with mates. It's good for spending time away from your kids if that's what you want to do as well. Zone 3 and 4 is arguably a little bit better for improving mitochondrial efficiency. Still improves your ability to use fat as fuel or fat oxidation, increasing your fitness and speed. And I think you've just got to be careful to allow adequate recovery between sessions. And but it's certainly an essential part of a balanced training plan. So that was just a little bit on sort of Zone 2 and Zone 3 and 4. Any questions on that? Or Rideau, do you want to add anything on that?
I was going to say the only way to change that lactate threshold to is to take bicarb.
Taking bicarb. We can talk about bicarb later. Bicarb for some reason illegal in horse racing, but legal at the Olympics. Yeah. Anyway, all right. Fuel. So we're going to say a little bit about fuel, and then I'm going to hand over to Rideau. She's going to talk about fuel because it's like her favourite topic. there's basically two sources of fuel that we use when we're running. We use fat and we use carbs. Fat is stored in our adipose tissue, that's our jiggly bits, and in our muscle. And we've got a huge supply of fat in our body. It's readily available, even people who are super, super skinny. Carbs are also something that we use for fuel, and carbs are found in the body in the form of circulating blood sugar, so glucose, and it's also stored in a few places as a thing called glycogen. So we store glycogen in our muscle, we store glycogen in our liver, and there's a relationship between those two things as far as regulating blood sugars go, and also releasing glycogen to be used for energy production in the muscle itself. There's advantages and disadvantages of those two things. So when we use fat as fuel, the advantage of using fat is that there's heaps of it, like it's not limited, essentially, that we've got enough fat in our bodies to fuel us for exercise for days and days and days and weeks and weeks and weeks. The disadvantage of using fat as fuel, though, is that it's much slower to access and it requires a lot more oxygen to produce the same amount of energy than carbs do. So when do we use fat as fuel? We normally are burning fat more in the much easier stages of running. So like zone 1 and 2 is essentially where we're mainly using fats as our fuel source, because the speed is lower and it's okay that we need to use a little bit more oxygen to burn the fat because there's heaps of oxygen around. We're not, the oxygen requirements aren't quite as great. And when do we use carbs as fuel? Like the advantages of using carbs as fuel are that we need lower amounts of oxygen to produce the same amount of energy, essentially. So, and we can also, because of that, we can produce energy from carbs a lot faster than we can produce energy from fats. So the disadvantage of carbs is that it's a limited resource. So during a prolonged or intense exercise session, we don't have enough carbohydrate in our body to just rely on that. It'd be great if we did. But when do we use carbs as fuel? So we use carbs as fuel mainly zone 3 and above. So very, very simply, and if there's any sports nutritionists here, I don't think Fiona's here, is she? Where is she? Very simply, and I'm probably doing a massive disservice to this as a topic, but we'll use fats when we're going slow. When we speed up, we start using carbs more. Okay. And this leads on to how we fuel ourselves during a run, essentially. So that's just a little graph of the kind of percentages of each that we might use. So it's like with anything in the human body that there's rarely absolutes. So when we're running slowly or we're doing like an easy running effort, we'll roughly be burning 20 to 40% of carbs, 60 to 80% of fat. So we're burning a much greater proportion of fat than we are carbs. Until when we're running a marathon pace, we're probably burning slightly more carbohydrates than we are fats, but we're still burning both of them. And then if we're doing really hard surges, we need we need oxygen quite quickly. We need energy quite quickly. We're using almost exclusively carbs during those efforts. So that's a little bit of a summary of that. Basically, at an easy pace, when our energy demand is low, fat oxidation can meet most of our energy demands. So we can burn the fat that's in our body. There's heaps of it. Carbohydrate use is reduced, but it's not zero. And then as we get to a higher pace, the fat can't supply the energy fast enough, so carbs are mostly used as the primary energy source. So really, what we find when we're exercising at those intensities, like I guess race paces for halves and full marathons, is that the amount of carbs available are the thing that limits us. So essentially that is why we need to be really careful about the amount of carbs we take on board, how we do it, when we do it, because our ability to do that has a huge amount to do with how successful we're going to be in the race. Okay. So I thought I'd just go through briefly when we take carbs and glucose on board, and then I'm going to throw to Rito to talk about gels. I won't talk too much about carb loading. So carb loading essentially is something that I think everyone's done before a race. I think that traditionally we've probably done it a little bit late, but carb loading essentially is kind of day 1 to 3 before a race, trying to get as many carbohydrates into our system as we can so that those carbs can be stored as muscle glycogen, muscle and liver glycogen, because that's the way that we store carbohydrates, which can then be released to make energy later on. I'm not the expert on carb loading, but the amount of carbs you've got to consume are significant, and you're getting a relative benefit from doing it. But if anyone wants to talk more about carb loading later on, we can do that, I guess. Pre-race meal. So the effect of carb loading is essentially to increase the amount of stored glycogen in your system. The effect of your pre-race meal is to have the maximum level of glucose in your body and bloodstream before you go and race. So that's why the pre-race meal essentially needs to be simple carbs that your body can access reasonably quickly, probably including some form of electrolytes too, and needs to be taken at sort of an adequate time prior to running. But that gets a little bit hard when races are at 6 a.m, I guess. So some people, everyone's individual here. I think some people can get away with having their pre-race meal an hour and a half before a race, and other people need to be looking at 3-4 hours before a race, which sometimes makes it wake up 1 or 2 in the morning. But anyone have a go-to pre-race meal? I'm sure we have a lot of them. What's in it?
Sean, I tend to have a litre of connoisseur ice cream the night before a race, but I know that plays havoc with my guts, but it's become a tradition of mine. So yeah.
What flavour?
Always vanilla. Has to be vanilla. Yeah. Mostly because it's creamy, but I don't know. I'm a very basic person, and I like to have basic things. So vanilla ice cream.
Sounds perfect.
So I've been told that the fat content obviously probably plays a part in causing me issues the next day, whether it be during the race or before the race or afterwards. But I guess my question to you would be that, should I be looking at sorbet instead? Because I have.
Look, I'm just going to say yes.
Yeah.
I think that maybe, and maybe a few other things too.
Yeah.
But I'm not the expert because my pre-race meal is not, or my night before meal is not perfect either. No.
But in all seriousness, though, I will give you a serious answer. Like the night before I ran Gold Coast Marathon, I went to a Japanese restaurant with a group of friends, and we ordered was 4 bowls of rice and 3 chicken skewers. So we got a few weird looks, obviously, because we weren't ordering anything else off the menu. But in your experience, does ordering so simple carbs obviously very good, but mixing fats and proteins, does that have any impact on the adoption or taking in of those carbs and storing them into glycogen? Does it slow things down? Does it,
That's a really good question, and one that I'd pass on to a nutritionist if there was one.
Sorry.
I don't know. Do you have an answer for that?
I don't. No, I don't. But all I've been told is to try and eliminate as many fats as possible.
Eliminate as many fats.
Because it can slow things down. And yeah, that's why the ice cream is typically recommended as a no-go. Yeah.
Probably not the best.
Yeah.
Ash, do you have one on that?
I would not be having ice cream the night before a race for sure. Maybe Chris, do the sorbet before Bunbury and let us know.
Yeah.
A little experiment. Don't do the dairy one in Bunbury. We don't need that shit down here, literally. But yeah, try the sorbet one and let us know. Now, I'm very, very basic pre-race meals. We're talking like white bread, rice, white wraps. Yeah.
Who was?
We used to do 6 hours eat a whole number of years ago.
Yeah.
And the race started at 5 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah.
And I've done a few. And I had a perfect setup on the day. It all depends on the person's metabolism, I think.
Yep.
Depends on where you're at in training and how quickly your body can take it in.
Yeah.
I set it up early in the morning, start at 6 o'clock. The race was at 5, I think it was. Yeah. Every 2 hours, I'd have a bowl of rice. and thin beaches. And we'll get to shoot 2 hours later.
Yeah.
Another one.
Yeah.
Another one. And another one. And we get 4 meals through the day. Then we come to the 6 hours.
Yeah. And the race was at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah. Yeah. Perfect.
And I just eat all day, and the body just taking
Yeah.
the tablets and it's just on fire.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. I think when you look at the recommended dosage of carbs in traditional carb loading, if people have never done it before, it's a huge amount of food. Like it's massive. It's a bowl of pasta is about a tenth of what you should be trying to do during a day.
Huge amount on the day.
Yeah.
When I got there, I was almost hungry.
Ash was sitting out there at lunch at work today, smashing something in the staff kitchen. It looked full of goodness. What was it? Some sort of burrito with brown rice all through it.
In a white wrap.
Rice and beans, white wrap. Yeah. Good stuff.
So I don't know as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Good work.
Sure, just before you move on.
Yeah.
I can understand the science and mathematics, but what's the age factor influence? As you get older,
Get better.
how does that have an impact?
As far as
In terms, we've got zones and you've got the amount of effort put into certain stages.
Well, I think as far as your heart rate zones go, they're all percentages of sort of maximum heart rate, I guess. And as you get older, your maximum heart rate gets less, or should get less. So I think that would change as you age as an athlete. But essentially, those zones and the recommendations for training in those zones. For the adaptations, I don't know if there'd be a huge difference in that. Minus the present, and my brain always goes here, just minus the presence of particular injuries or discomforts or pains or whatever. Like I think there's a lot of things people maybe present to us with that we might say, oh, okay, well maybe do a little bit less of this sort of training and a little bit more of that as far as injury management goes. But yeah, I think. Does that make sense? I think with age, that heart rate scale would change a little bit, but essentially the physiology behind what's going on should be reasonably similar.
I was just wondering about the absorption of certain compounds and all that sort of stuff. So.
Yeah, as far as fueling goes, I don't know if there's different recommendations for older and younger athletes and runners.
I don't know, and it's interesting because a lot of the research that gets done is usually on trained males in like a 20 to 30-year-old age group. So a lot of the stuff that we extrapolate from research is coming from that particular group of people. So
there's not much research on pregnant women who have always run and what sort of nutritional demands they need because they're still running and we probably still need those. Yeah.
Well, a really, really good example of not a 20 to 30-year-old male is, Genevieve Gregson or Jess Stenson competing in for Australia in marathons while breastfeeding their children. And you can imagine their energy demands are becoming completely different to a 25-year-old male. So God knows how they're carb loading. I don't know. That's a question. You've done UTMB, Ash, and you've done it while you've had a baby. I mean, you probably know more than most, but it's it'd be really interesting to find out, more. The research should cover more broad spectrum.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think as you age, if you've been a regularly participating in activity, your body develops, and I'm probably getting more energy out of my body now than I did in my 20s and 30s. And I'm still doing 12-hour events and still being able to reach my potential. Whereas it takes 10, 15, 20 years for your body to develop. To be the most efficient at what it does, then other things the actual physiology, I think is probably better
Yeah.
the older you get.
It takes time to figure out what works as well too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like probably takes a few failed races and you're not doing heaps of those per year, so it yeah, exactly. They're all good races. There's no failures, there's just opportunities for improvement, right, Dennis? Yeah.
You don't learn when you do well.
So that probably takes us on to gels and why we supplement with them. And I will throw to Rito to talk about gels. But essentially, when we talk about doing an endurance race and glucose and glycogen, and again, I'm glad there's no nutritionists in the room, but we've only got enough glycogen stored in our body for something like 90 minutes of exercise. Even the best endurance athletes have, somewhere between 90 minutes and 2 hours worth of glycogen. So when you're doing a longer race, you're expecting your levels of muscle glycogen to drop to a point where there's not a lot left. So what we're trying to do with carbohydrate gels essentially is supplement that. So we're increasing our amount of circulating blood glucose so that our muscles can use that carbohydrate and effectively spare our muscle glycogen until later in the race when we really, really need it, when we're sprinting for the line. And on that note, I'm going to pass you on to special comments from our podcast personality, Ashlee Ritson, and she's going to take you through gel strategy, what we do when we do it.
Thanks, Sean. Gels with a Z. Yep. Glad we kept that in there. So, like Sean said, during those endurance events, so we're talking half and marathon kind of races, once we've used all of that stored glycogen, we need to try and get something into the system as efficiently as possible to the muscle tissue so that we have enough glucose to keep those muscles firing and to keep the blood sugar levels high enough so that we don't get delirious or something like that during an event. With gels, you'll find most of them have a combination of glucose and fructose. The reason that is the gut can kind of handle processing about 1 gram per minute of glucose without having too much waste product sitting in the gut. And that's where that sort of 60 grams an hour comes from. So traditionally it was like most people would aim for about 60 grams per hour of carbohydrates to keep them going. And that seems like a really safe number to use. Then a lot of experiments were happening by adding a different type of carbohydrate in the form of fructose, and having that combination of glucose and fructose would take that absorption rate up to about 1.5 grams of carbohydrates per minute. And that's where you get that 90 grams. So you'll often see aim for 60 to 90 grams an hour. And that is why. So when the glucose from the gel comes into the gut, it's going basically from the gut across into the bloodstream and then going straight out to the muscle tissue. When the fructose is coming in from that gel, it's going into the gut, it's passing over into the bloodstream, it goes to your liver, and then your liver decides it's either going to store it, or in the case of when you're doing a hard efforts or long intensity or long duration of exercise, it'll turn that fructose into glucose and lactate, and it will transport that via the bloodstream out to your muscle tissue. So it does take a little bit longer for the fructose to actually reach the muscle tissue and a little bit more work on the liver, but basically that's how you can get the maximum amount of glucose to your muscle and also into the bloodstream while you're exercising. So the ratios of glucose to fructose at the moment, this has changed a lot over the years. It used to be sort of, 0.5 of fructose to 1 glucose, but now it sits around more like 1 glucose to 0.8 fructose, so almost a 1-to-1 ratio of the two of them. So it's really interesting when you look at different gels, like what they consist of. there'll be a few gels as well that only have glucose in them. So some people will find that the fructose does irritate their gut a little bit because it is absorbed and transported differently to glucose, which most people don't have too many problems with. And then interestingly, there'll be some gels on the market that are just pure sucrose, like your maple syrups, honey and that sort of thing. Sucrose is a disaccharide, which is a combination of glucose and fructose. Most of them, so something like maple syrup, that's going to be about a 1-to-1 ratio. So just to keep in mind, if you're taking something like that, you are going to have more fructose in that gel than one of your other ones that is purely glucose or has that different ratio of glucose to fructose. It's interesting as well when you look at the gels, how much carbohydrate is actually in each one. So if you're aiming for, like, say, 60 to 90 grams, you are going to need to take, like 2 of one gel compared to maybe like 3 or 4 of another gel to try and reach that same amount of grams per hour. So if you you can afford it, and you're taking Morton's gels, you're going to need like 3 to 4 of them per hour compared to one of your cheaper ones like Akota's or the Bix or something like that. And then when we come down and we have a look at the ingredients of them, so all the carbohydrates, they have to be suspended in water, and that's going to help with that absorption in the gut as well. So most of them will have like water as their main ingredient. And then maltodextrin is the glucose part, the carbohydrate that's in it. And then if it's got fructose in it, we'll have that in there as well. And then everything else in there basically just to keep that carbohydrate sitting on a shelf without going off. So all preservatives and salt and that sort of thing too. Your Morton's gel, and I think this is the reason that they claim that they can charge like $7 a gel or something like that, is they have this gelling agent where they have 3 different sort of natural ingredients that kind of suspends the glucose and fructose in it. So they have pure glucose in it rather than maltodextrin, which does have to be broken down in the gut a little bit. And then using this special gelling agent, it'll transfer straight into the bloodstream from the gut, which they claim helps with any sort of GI distress. Because if that carbohydrate isn't transferred into the bloodstream, it's going to have to keep going down through the gut, through the small intestine, and it will end up in the large intestine, which is not ideal when you've still got like an hour and a half left to go in a run. And a lot of people will sort of claim that, I take a gel or 2 and that's what gives me my GI distress when I'm running or I'm training or something like that. And I think it's really important to have a look at the other things that could be influencing someone's GI distress when they're running. So we can see this fine specimen in the middle here. Sorry. Oh yeah, coffee is a big one. No, but the fine specimen, the running one here, that physical jiggling up and down is going to affect the gut. Like everybody knows that. Like you go for a run, it's going to make you do a poo basically if you haven't already been. So if there's something sitting in the gut, that physical motion is going to keep that moving down. The other thing with the gastrointestinal tract is when we're exercising, your blood flow is being prioritized to your muscles, to your lungs, to skin, everywhere else except the gut. So you only have that limited amount of blood flow passing through the gut, which again is why you can only extract about 60 to 90 grams of carbs out of the gut while you're exercising. And whatever is left behind in terms of carbohydrate is just going to build up. So if you can't tolerate and you can't extract more than sort of 60 to 90 grams, unless you've been training for it, like you'll hear of these elite runners and ultra endurance people that are doing like 150 grams an hour or something like that, but they're not actually absorbing 150 grams an hour. Like, yes, they've trained themselves to be able to absorb a little bit more, but they've also just trained their gut to be able to tolerate and hold on to that waste product, perhaps, unless they do have a little incident while they're running. But yeah, whatever's left behind in the gut that you haven't absorbed, it's going to come out the other end. Water is another really important one. Like you need to have enough water to be able to digest the carbohydrate that's in there, but not so much, that you're going to get the jiggly stitch and everything like that. And of course, caffeine. So like a pre-run coffee is going to increase gut motility. What was the fancy word you used today when we were talking about poo? peristalsis, and you did that hand movement. What peristalsis looks like when we're talking about coffee before a run. Coffee before a run. And then also be mindful of caffeine in gels. So quite a few of them will have caffeine in them. And then if you're going to be taking 6, 7, 8 gels in a marathon and they all have caffeine in them, that is going to increase gut motility as well. I mean, the reason the caffeine is in there is for more like the psychological benefits of trying to make you a bit more alert, trying to reduce that rate of perceived exertion, making you just feel a bit more on fire. But yeah, it will have an effect in other places as well. And then Sean's already sort of talked about this, but, like those pre-race meals are really important. So the timing of your breakfast and what you're having, everybody's going to be really different for that. So that can really affect what's happening with your gut while you're running. And the pre-race, the dinner the night before, like Chris was saying, those fatty, oily foods, they take longer to be processed in the gut. So they might sit there for hours, which is why you've probably been told, don't have your fried rice or whatever it was.
Yeah. No, definitely no connoisseur ice cream. Yeah.
Yeah. And I put beer in there because I think Sean had a really good experience with beers a few nights before Melbourne Marathon. Was there a number that you would recommend? Adam, what's the perfect number of beers 2 nights before a marathon? Double figures, okay. It didn't impact your run on Sunday. That's what Sean's going to use as his excuse for now. Yeah. Yeah, but another thing to be mindful that just to summarise with the gels, if you're not using them already, like a good place to start would be around that kind of 60 grams an hour. So any run that goes for an hour or longer would be a good opportunity to start trying to use them, whether that's like in a training run or a race or something like that. And I think it's 3 Waters, is it 9 weeks away, 10 weeks away? 9 weeks on Sunday. So if you're planning on using gels at 3 Waters, I would recommend to start trialling it now. So trial it in your longer run, or like I say, anything over an hour, that's when you can start playing around with this sort of thing. Everybody is going to be so different with what they like in terms of the consistency and that sort of thing. So gels can range from like a really juice-like consistency in the pure ones to like your Mortons and your Hammer, which are like almost like a hard gel. So the consistency of them can be different. I know Alice had her first experience the other day taking a gel. What was your feedback on your first gel experience, Alice? Yeah, the face. Yeah.
It was more of a texture. I wasn't ready for it to be so thick. And of course, you crack open the gel and have a taste at home before you go. So I was up 45. No idea drinker. So texture for me, I'll have to play around with them and find when we try the pure ones. Lots of comments on my Instagram from various people who run about the more liquidy consistency being easier to stomach if a bit of a sensitive gag reflex. So I want to try that.
Yeah, I think my advice to Alice was just to desensitize the area, which she thought was really funny, but I didn't get the joke. So yeah, everyone's going to be very unique and individual. So your recipe for race day, it's yours, and you should play around with it now and have your disasters during training and not on race day.
And maybe a little tip that I've learned over a long time. When you're starting with them, don't take a whole blast of it. Sip away at it. Take 2 or 3 Ks to just take it in over 2 or 3 Ks. And I do it as a matter of course now, because otherwise it's a big hit that you've got to, and usually half will go down your windpipe, and you can really mess it up really quickly. So a bit of advice would be just to sip away at it. Just take its time. Won't be any worse doing it that way.
But it'd be worth mentioning also fluid-based carbohydrates like tailwind and stuff.
Yeah. Great point. So it's one of those ones where triathletes obviously are going to be using this a lot more because they can just get that liquid in during the ride component of their racing. But, like over and a half and a marathon distance, getting that amount of liquid in with your carbohydrate would be, I think, a bit of a challenge, which is why gels are going to be more effective. And then, if you're struggling to keep up that amount of liquid, I'd stick with the gels. But yeah, that is another option of using.
Really, with the gels, you should be taking that much liquid anyway, because, that's I was saying, you've got that gag reflex. But if you take just as much water with your gel.
Yeah, and again, like if someone can if they can tolerate that amount of liquid, then that's perfect.
You can also triple the concentration of target in that as well.
Yeah, and then you'd just be like then playing around with how many grams an hour you're doing from those different like types of fuel sources. So yeah, exactly right. Gels aren't the only way to get carbohydrates in. There's chews and those sorts of things as well. They're just not as effective, I guess, as gels. They're going to be the simplest way to get that glucose straight into the muscle cell as quickly as we can without too many side effects. Cool. You're up, Sean. Take it home.
Thanks, mate.
Two questions quickly. What's the consistency of the big gels like? Are they most on the running side or the big side?
Definitely not on the running.
It's like salt and sugar. Yeah,
Big volume too. Big volume.
Yeah, they are. They're a big volume, and I think they had one of the biggest. Like they've got the 40 grams. I think in the flavoured ones they're about 30 grams of carbohydrates per gel. But yeah, definitely not on the running side. I would have said, hey.
Yeah, they're definitely sticky. I wouldn't call them like say as thick as a goo, like a goo gel or a coda. Those are quite thick. But yeah, the Bix is kind of the middle ground in terms of consistency, like the viscosity. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, it's going to come down to, I think, flavors that you can tolerate, I think is a big thing for people. So like Bix, for example, I think has three or four flavors now. But there are others that have 25 flavors. So, and Morton just has the one. That's their singular flavor. They've got the caffeine version and the non-caffeine version. So it's going to come down to what you can tolerate, I think, over a period of 3, 4, 5 hours, wherever it might be. And also what you can afford. A tip I learned a long time ago, actually, on my training runs, not necessarily on my marathon specific runs where I want to be taking gels to practice what that's like on race day. But if I'm going on a long, easy run, like a 3-hour easy run, rather than spend $35 on gels for the morning, just take a bag of snakes out with me and just have, again, you're only getting glucose there. There's no, you don't get the combination, but you do have still an opportunity to not bonk at the 2 or 2.5 hour mark of your long run because you've still got some carbohydrates coming in.
Yeah, you can turn a long run into a $30 or $40 exercise pretty quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
There are, yeah. And so a lot of them would just be listed as like salts on the ingredients list, but they'll usually advertise on the front that they have some sort of electrolyte or something like that as well. And then you'd just be looking at like what particular salts they are on the ingredient list. Yeah.
Hamstoppers used to eat grass. Used to just run, go a bit of grass, chew it up. He's got world records. He's got world records.
Thanks for that pearl of wisdom, Dennis. Maybe we should try that. What's the nutritional makeup of grass? Could put that in a gel. Yeah. I thought we might spend a lot of time talking about that, and we have. So I've only got one slide on this last bit. So the brain is kind of the third part of our little trifecta, I guess. And the only thing to say on the brain that I'm going to touch on anyway is that the brain is an extremely glucose-hungry organ as well. So for us to be making good decisions while we're running and while we're racing, but also while we're training, we need to be fueling adequately. So we need to have enough blood glucose floating around our system during the race and during training so that we can make really good decisions about things like what pace we should be running at. The brain will also give us sort of confidence in what pace we should be running at based on what we've done at training. You know, sometimes it's good to listen to those little thoughts in our head that tell us to kind of slow down, but other times if if we've been there before, we know what it feels like. It's a lot easier to do and to try and maintain. And it's essentially, it's another reason that we need to maintain our blood glucose at a particular level, because that's what the bonking is that you see some athletes do. Essentially, it's that decrease in levels of blood glucose to an extent where they're dizzy, foggy, in worst case scenario, losing consciousness, falling over, all those sorts of things. So fuel for the brain as well. The other thing the brain does, this is my last shout out, it's to Andrew Bates, is it can reframe pain of training. And I was running with Batesy on a Tuesday morning a couple of weeks ago. I'm a major attender at the Runners Club interval sessions, more than I do other things, but I'm pretty much always there. And we were doing hill reps up to the Lighthouse Hill, and we'd done, I think, rep 3 of 6, and we got to the end of this hill and I was completely gassed and struggling for breath. And I said to Batesy, something like, that was really hard, wasn't it? I think there were a few swear words in there. And Batesy turned around and said, what a privilege it is that we were physically able to run up that hill again. And I think that was a perfect example of reframing those negative thoughts that we get in training. So thanks for that, Batesy. Appreciate it. Thought I'd shout out to you for that. That's all we've got tonight, guys. Sorry, we've taken...
Sneak in on the brain stuff. So obviously for those of you who don't know, I'm not a runner. Signed up for the half. Ash is mentoring me through it. So the longer runs and the harder runs, and even like I had to Google what tempo running was. What is it? So pushing myself into those uncomfortable, whereas I've had walk and run. I've played lots of sport. I've played netball, basketball, water polo, things like that. So chasing after a ball, I've got no problem with running fast, but I've never run fast along the back bench. So training your brain that it's okay to be in the uncomfortable areas is a huge learning thing for me. But I think that, like you said, Sean, you've got to train your brain to kind of be okay with where you're at. I think that's massive in training for endurance events. So yeah, that surprised me a lot.
Yeah, that whole comfortable being uncomfortable thing, huh? Yeah. Which turns out to be good fun later. Ish. Thanks a lot, guys. That's all that I've got, or we've got, and but really, really happy to hang around and have a bit of a chat or answer a few questions. Or
well, that's what I thought. Maybe some general questions. There's a fair few people in the room that may be able to help side, particularly someone that may be doing their first half or full. There's probably a few hundred marathons in the room, so there's probably a bit of experience around. So there's any.
Yep. I was just going to ask about salt tab in running.
Yes.
Background with salt tablets. If you are someone who cramps and suffers the effects of low salt through high sweat, which a few on Cowan and a few people do, salt tablets certainly help. I've seen a few people on long runs who are pulled up, holding their heavies, and take a salt tablet that gets them through and gets them back on track, or a electrolyte type drink and stuff. So again, it's down to your training and I guess the time of year. So if it's summertime, I do pop a salt tablet every now and again, mainly because I've got them now and I just want to use them up, but it keeps all those niggles away as such, where at winter time I'll go off them for 6 months and I won't touch them. So it's just, I guess, a bet on the sweat loss, and if you look at your hat or your clothes when you finished that long run in the summertime, if you've got those white lines, you probably would be someone who benefits from salt tablets. But if you're some of the younger ladies would never sweat in and out of a long run on a 30-degree day, so may not need those salt tablets. So just depends on I guess, but definitely helpful if you do suffer salt loss in your sweat.
And again, look at the amount of salt on the capsule tablets, because I would have been the first few marathons underdosing myself quite a lot, because I thought it was big. I thought there was a lot more in it than there was until you actually break it down and you go, oh no, you actually have to, if you want to do a milligram or 1,000 milligrams an hour, which is what some people recommend, depending on what your sweat rate is and all this, yeah, that's a lot.
But you can overdose them.
You can overdose them, and it's probably not lots of medical warnings, etc. I guess sometimes you put a lot outside for 2 or 3 hours and
This is not a shout out or to a this is not sponsor of the podcast or the club, but I think Precision Fuel and Hydration have a very good calculator that you can use on their website that will you can tell them generally what your body composition is, what you're training for, how what your experience with running is, and you can tell them what your sweat rate is, and and it will tell you how many electrolytes you need for the duration of your run and what you need to be doing in the lead up to your run as well. So whether it's preloading on sodium the day before or the morning of, and then what you need to take during the run. And for another thing, we had so another reference to sweat loss. Simon, who I run the podcast with, he had Gabby Veer, a nutritionist, do a sweat test on him on an episode, I don't know, months ago now. But Simon's a very heavy sweater, and it's like exceptionally sweaty, like 8-9 times sweatier than most people, which is crazy to think. And that explains why he's cramped on a number of his marathons, including 3 of them here at Three Waters. So, I think if it's worth your time, probably going back and listening to that just as an opportunity to hear Gabby talk about, what's involved in that process and whether or not you think you might need something like that if it has been a problem for you in the past.
Another thing is Dimity's often here this time of year as well, so she'll run tests and that kind of She's part of precision hydration.
Yep. Any other general questions there?
I'm just curious about if you're doing a zone 2 only run, what you're saying is that you really don't need any. Is there a point when you would need gels or carbs or something when you're doing just zone 2 just cruise along?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there is. So with the duration of exercise, you will just drift further up in towards that zone 3 anyway, and or it will come down. So there is a limit there as far as the duration goes, but you can go for a long time, essentially. Like I think the estimate is that in zone 3 you've probably got like an hour. Is that right, Rito? We're talking about that today. Yeah. And zone 2, the fitter you are, you can go for a long time. Yeah, long time. Yep. Yeah.
An extension to that question, please, Sean. And I'm not sure if you're the person to answer this, but if I do have a breakfast before my hour easy run, and knowing that it's going to be primarily burning fat for the fuel of that, will having the carbohydrates inhibit that fat oxidation process? If the carbs are there for the body to use.
Yeah, I don't think so. Not that I know of anyway. No, I think you want to have carbs as well as fat available. Because I think when you looked at that little breakdown, there's always a percentage of both being burnt anyway, right? So whether you're running easy or marathon pace or hard surges, it's never the body's never burning stuff in separate boxes. It's always doing a bit of a combination. Yeah. So, no, I think both. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think you'll always hear there's going to be arguments for doing fasted training and that sort of thing too, but you need glucose in other areas of your body. Like it's not just for the muscles. So I think that's another and blood sugar levels and those sorts of things too. So there's probably other benefits for having that carb meal before an easy run. But there are also benefits which we haven't gone into today about doing fasted runs and how that can change your fat oxidation efficiency as well.
Is the idea there that you have less carbohydrates and therefore you're encouraging your body to use fats or to become more efficient at using fat deeper into zone 2?
Yeah, Stephen, I don't know what your theories are or what your experiences are on this sort of thing, but the ultra, training more in that zone 2 and relying more on the fat oxidation side of things and sort of tailoring your training into that area should make you more effective than when you're running for 4 days.
Yeah, certainly. I don't have gels at all. I just eat real food. Yeah. So you start off with all the gels, and then you find you migrate more and more to just normal food, and you start eating the chips and the longs and that sort of thing. But you know, a bacon hamburger or have a cheese toasties is go to. But yeah, certainly that the last one, the brain, definitely not fueling will affect your brain. Yes.
Stephen has experienced that a couple of times.
I think running for 4 days probably affects your brain. Yeah.
I wonder too if someone like Steve, who's a fairly accomplished ultra runner, is so efficient at using fat for fuel that his requirement for supplementing with carbs is much lower too. No, mate, I didn't say that. Inspirational.
Okay, well, I think we might wrap it up. It's been an excellent session, and I think the important thing to remember is that everyone in this room is an athlete, right? Or they're supporting an athlete, but everyone in this room is an athlete. And, you know, we at the Bunbury Runners Club have always focused on giving those best opportunities for people to experience what we all experience. So spread the word. We'll have another seminar in March. It's about inspiration. So we'll be talking to people like Stephen and Batesy and people like that have gone that extra yard, but they started where most people start. They started with 5Ks and they started with 10K runs. And they've gone on to do extraordinary things and continue to do them. And I think that will be the message in the next one. How have we got into our 60s and late 60s and still happy to run a marathon and half marathon? And it'll be really beneficial for the younger athletes because we've transited all the way through and been quite successful in doing it. So that next session, it'll be a free range sort of thing, but you know, with some order. And we'll just talk about how people have achieved those wonderful things. And there's some amazing stories in this room alone that we can have a little bit of a chat about. So, Alice, all the best, but we'll be watching you in a few weeks yet. Ash, good luck on Saturday.
Thank you.
Sean, thanks heaps for the effort. And Chris, thanks for coming down and all the support from the Warp team. And we're just going to spend a lot more time talking to you.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
So,
Alrighty, weapons. That's episode 002 of the Road to the Checkered Bastard done. A massive thanks to the Bunbury Runners Club and Koombana Physio for bringing us along for the ride. Hopefully no one in Bunbury is taking my vanilla ice cream strategy to heart. I hope they're sticking with the sorbet instead. You certainly don't want to have the same issues I've had in the past. Bunbury Runners Club happened to be hosting another seminar of inspirational stories on the 12th of March. That's a Thursday. We'd love to bring this to the listenership for episode 003, so keep an eye out for that one if you can't make it down in person. Beyond that, we'll be catching up with the Pace team in a few weeks' time as they prepare for their roles on race day. An eclectic mix of individuals with some familiar names in the WA running community who will no doubt provide some entertainment for the listeners. And finally, yes, the rumours are true. The marathon, the half marathon and the 10K have sold out. However, if you are keen to sign up, head over to runbunbury.com.au where you can find details about how to jump on the waitlist. Of course, if you want to get in touch with us, you can do that via Instagram on WA Running Pod. You can do it via email or warunningpodcast@gmail.com. Our Strava group is Warp. Look forward to seeing you all next time here on the WA Running Podcast and the Road to the Checkered Bastard. See you guys.